Thank you, Maharaj, for joining today for this Monks podcast. It's
Hare
wonderful
Krishna.
to have you here. Yes. So I thought today we could discuss about the subject of sensitivity in presenting spiritual wisdom. In today's culture, quite often offensive words are equated with violence. In fact, they're considered more serious than violence, and especially in the West, people, the word uses, they're cancelled because they made some politically incorrect comments or some of comments that are considered offensive. So I've seen two different attitudes. One is devotees at one level think that because people will get offended, let us not speak anything which will offend them. And other is that we have to speak what we have to speak, and whether people get offended or not, that is their problem. So how do we have a balance between the two? Maybe we could discuss something based about that.
Yeah, I think really it's a question of judgment. It's a question of wisdom. It's also a question of one's own nature. Wisdom in terms of determining what is the best way to speak at a particular time in a particular place for a certain set of people and in circumstances.
Yes.
And then also there is the nature of the person.
That's a good perspective. Yeah. Some people will just be what they are.
Yes, some people are naturally very outspoken, and they, as they say it like it is.
Yeah.
Some people are really not like that. So, different strokes for different folks. So different people will have different approaches. So I think that cannot be negated. It's always going to be there. So I guess wisdom is what, incorporates the judgment and takes into account the understanding of how to say it, where to say it, when to say it, what to say.
Yes, Maj. I think Prabhupada defines in the 10th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, intelligence means to see things in their proper perspective. So
Yeah.
That is also something similar. Adesha Kala Patra, as we have discussed earlier also. So now I think most of our talk will focus on intelligence. Now with respect to nature, there is at one level, if somebody is known to speak maybe a little brusque, known to speak in a particular way, and then people get used to that. So, and some people feel that we are just, so the problem is, I wouldn't say so much that if somebody has a particular nature, but when they start thinking this is the right thing to do for everyone, that is when the problem comes up. That means what I'm speaking is the right way to speak, and everybody else is not courageous enough to speak the way I speak. Then it may happen that others may get either start doubting whether is this the way I'm meant to speak, or may artificially start imitating. And generally, if we are with a person for some time, then we just get to know their nature, and then we know which words are spoken with real anger or which are spoken just because of nature. So there is a adequate need to acknowledge nature, but then to consider one's nature to be a virtue, that is where it becomes a problem, I feel.
It also depends on other factors, like what kind of relationship you have with the person you're speaking to. If you have a very old relationship with the person, the understanding is good, the other person knows you very well, understands you for what you are, then you can speak so many things and the person will not take offense or will not misunderstand. On the other hand, if you just met someone for the first time and you say something then that person may take offense because there is no relationship there. So that's another factor, the relationship.
Okay.
Another factor could be, let's say, age. An elderly person can get away with saying certain things, or small children can get away by saying certain things. But people in between may not be able to get away so easily. So
That's a good way, yes.
what Prabhupada could say,
Hmm.
others may not be able to say and get away with it.
Okay, so
Another
I was just
factor
thinking
would
of,
be
yeah.
the level of one's spiritual advancement. The more advanced one is, maybe it will be accepted. And maybe for others it won't. And also, it depends, because just as the speakers have different natures, the listeners also have different natures. Now, I know, I'm sure we all know, different devotees or different individuals, even if they're not devotees, who have different ways of presenting their opinions. Some are very brusque, very blunt, to the point of being harsh, sometimes, being offensive even. And they have their takers. I mean, there are people who really like that. Some people like to hear such speakers. And there are others who may get completely turned away from such speakers, and they may prefer others who are probably softer and, like that. So it really depends. I remember one time there was a devotee. I mean, he's still there, of course. And he was well known for being very brash in his speaking. And sometimes sitting in the class, I would cringe a little bit. Oh, he's speaking in a certain way like this, and. And several others would be like me, who would cringe sometimes a little bit. But there were some others who really relished it. And they they found it, very nice. And they got attracted to Krishna consciousness. They became good devotees. Some others maybe got turned away because of that. So it's a very kind of subjective thing, But yes, as you said, we have to keep in mind different strokes for different folks, and different speakers will have their own natures, and it's not possible to expect that everybody will speak exactly in the same way. So we have to accommodate that.
Yes, Maharaj. And just echoing your point, I remember one devotee had invited me he was doing village preaching, and he invited me to his village for speaking. And then I have normally a very analytical way of presenting. And people were okay, they passively hearing. But then after I finished, he spoke a few minutes, and he was like making fun of how foolish this thing is. And asakela paije, we should do this, we should not do that. And I saw people were enjoying that. So I realized that they didn't need an analytical kind of presentation. They needed a more something which stirs things up. So I would say that now maybe I was just trying to think of a visual. There are 4 factors: that the speaker, there is the content of the speech, then there's the context of the speech, and then there's the hearer. So the context and the hearer can be the same, but they can be different also. Like somebody might want to hear, might be okay hearing some harsh words about oneself being spoken in private, but not in public. So if we consider these 4 things: speaker, content, context, and audience or hearer, then on one side, from our perspective, if we are speakers, we can try to sensitize ourselves to the context and the audience. But another side, as you rightly said, that different people have different natures. So then maybe it is the hearer's responsibility to find out who are the speakers they can connect with, who they can be inspired by. And then, so it's more of a two-way responsibility, instead of at one level saying that the speakers have to moderate the way they speak, but we can also say the hearers need to moderate who they hear from.
Yeah, that is there. In a situation where we have Bhagavatam classes in the temple, let's say, and
Yes,
the devotees attend, and
yeah.
there are different speakers almost every day.
Yes,
so the hearer may be able to relate to some speakers and may be able to not relate to some other speakers. But so long as the speaker is speaking information or knowledge or presenting things from the scripture in an authorized way, he's not concocting something, he's not creating a new philosophy, he's not misrepresenting it, or he's not really causing some major offense or something like that. I think one should hear, and keeping in mind that there are different styles of presentation, and ultimately because it is the spiritual wisdom which is authentic, one should hear.
Yes, Maharaj.
The problem comes up when the listener feels that the speaker is not speaking something that is authorized, that the speaker is deviating from the philosophy or something like that. That is when a little issue will come up.
Yes.
And there may be different, understandings of that also.
Yeah. So just there is at one level, if somebody is as you mentioned the context, if somebody is regularly coming for classes, then even if somebody gets disturbed by hearing something, they have they have the regular connections with devotees where they can seek clarification, and then they can get things resolved. Now the problem, especially in today's world, is that most of the content is available online, and online at one level we don't know who all are hearing, and especially if something is preserved online. So something which say in a closed environment could seem just like a good joke can in a different setting seem like a horrible insult. So the in one sense the context has changed significantly today, and it's almost like every word is we have to weigh it to consider how different people will perceive it, and that makes things much tougher. So
yes, these are the perils of speaking via the internet.
yeah, we expand the reach, but we expand the danger also. Yeah.
So one has to speak in a measured way, but of course, if one is speaking with sensitivity, with one is speaking the truth, but properly, sensitively, then I think that's not really such a problem. It's not that such things happen so frequently. They may happen sometimes, but if we are careful about how we present things, in any case, one should be careful, whether it's on the internet or not. If one is speaking on a public platform, then one should be careful anyway. One should see that one is presenting things in the right manner, one is speaking the right philosophy, one is, being sensitive to certain concerns.
Yes, Manoj. So there is, it was going back to these 5 points of the speaker, the content, the context, and the hearer. So to some extent, there is a purpose for speaking. At one level, we could say the purpose is simply to glorify Krishna, and whoever hears the glorification of Krishna does become purified by that. At the same time, we have to see for a particular audience whether they are being attracted toward Krishna or not, or are they getting alienated toward Krishna. At a subconscious level, somebody might be purified by hearing about Krishna, but at a conscious level, they might get alienated. So if we consider, say, Bhakti Thakur would rate articles based on how many times the word Krishna would come, and then he would publish them in the Harmonist. Now, one of the early books that Srila Prabhupada wrote was Ishopanishad. And in the Ishopanishad, Prabhupada doesn't use the word Krishna much at all. He uses the word God or the Supreme. And Krishna is used very sparsely. And one understanding I got is that Ishopanishad was meant more for people coming from impersonal background. So Prabhupada doesn't use the personal address too much over there. So we see here, Prabhupada is not compromising on the message. He does point out the deficiencies of the impersonal understanding when it is considered the ultimate understanding within the content of what he's speaking, but he's regulating the words that he uses. Similarly, when Prabhupada is presenting in Easy Journey to Other Planets, he is very respectful to scientists. He says, we present this for the consideration of our esteemed readers, the scientists. And then he uses the word antimatter to refer to spirit. So I was making this point that as a speaker, how important is it for us to consider what is the effect of what I'm speaking? Can I just say that this is what has been spoken and this is what I'm going to speak? But what is the effect of that? How much should that determine what I speak?
I think because your question was why are we speaking the truth, right?
Yes.
So I mean, it is a given that we have to speak the truth.
Yes.
We cannot speak the wrong philosophy. We cannot speak.
Yeah.
We cannot misrepresent. But what is the purpose of doing that? So very succinctly, if one were to explain the purpose of speaking Satyam, it is Hitam, which is for the benefit and welfare of everyone.
Okay.
That's the sum and substance of any form of communication. You know, whether it's verbal communication, written communication, or communication through gestures or whatever. The purpose ultimately should always be Hitam, which means for the benefit of everybody. You know, this is one of my favorite verses. Favorite in the sense that I quote it often because it is of great practical value. You know, from the 17th chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, when Krishna speaks about austerity of speech, body and mind. And in austerity of speech, he says, Anudvegakaram vakyam, satyam priyahitam chayat, sadhyaya bhyasanam chaiva, vanmayam tapo uchyate. So he speaks, he gives different characteristics of our speech. And one is that the vakyam, or our sentences or our speech, should not be udvegakaram. Udvega means to cause agitation or disturbance. It should be anudvegakaram. So the first quality of speech in the mode of goodness is that it doesn't agitate others unnecessarily.
Yes.
And the second is satyam, which is the truth. Third is priya, which is it should be pleasing. Fourth is hitam, which means it's beneficial. And the fifth is swadhyaya, abhyasanam. So one should recite, you know, the Vedic literature, the holy name, and so on. Vanmayam tapa uchyate. So this is austerity of the voice or austerity of speech. So of all these categories, you know, these elements that are mentioned here, obviously it is important to speak satyam because we can't speak a falsehood. By satyam, in various conversations and letters, Sheila Prabhupada refers to satyam as being spiritual wisdom.
Yes.
So especially when you're discussing scripture or spiritual knowledge, then satyam is very important. At the same time, what is the purpose of that satyam? It is hitam. as mentioned in this verse of the Bhagavad Gita. So, I mean, there is much that Prabhupada has said on this, about it. And I think as we go along, perhaps we'll get an opportunity to discuss it also. But to succinctly answer your question as to what is the purpose of speaking anything, it should be hitam,
Okay.
benefit. But what is benefit? That has to be seen in the light of satyam, of truth. Because if one doesn't have knowledge of the truth, then one may have some misconception about what hitam or benefit is. You know, and say for example, one may continue to give some intoxicating substances to an addict just because one feels that that is for his or her benefit, because otherwise the person is suffering, so let me give it. So I would say the ultimate purpose should always be hitam. That has to be kept in mind. But hitam with reference to satyam. And here it's a little nuanced, because what exactly is the effect that we are looking for? We want to do good to somebody. We are speaking the truth. Our motivation is good. We want to do good to somebody, but the result is contrary to what we hoped for. So then it means we have to re-navigate. We have to rethink, where did I go wrong?
Yes.
Now, there will always be people who will get upset whatever you say. So you can't stop speaking the truth because somebody doesn't like it. But the point is that as far as possible, we have to keep in mind the effect it's going to have. So there's satyam, there is hitam, the benefit, and at the same time, there is also the reaction, the response of that speech or that action on somebody else. Ultimately, we want that person to respond positively.
Yes, Maharaj. So, if we consider anudvegakaram and priyam, so of course at one level, this is all from the speaker's perspective. Now, I intend to speak in a way that doesn't agitate. I intend to speak in a way that is truthful, that is beneficial, that is pleasing. So we could, if we say have a like a 4-quadrant visual. Now one is we speak, that is, if we just put these two things, beneficial and pleasing.
Yeah, beneficial and pleasing. So the top right-hand quadrant is beneficial and pleasing.
This is what is most desirable.
Most desirable.
Mm-hmm. Then we have, say,
beneficial but not pleasing in the green one.
Beneficial and not beneficial and displeasing.
Beneficial,
we could say it is maybe essential at times.
Yeah.
But it's not desirable, but maybe essential.
Yeah.
Then if it is not beneficial, not pleasing, that is definitely undesirable.
Yeah. Never to be done.
Okay.
Not just undesirable, but never to be done.
So, and then if something is pleasing but not beneficial, then we could say this is
also not to be done.
Okay, not to be done. This is underutilization. We are not really doing any benefit to them.
Yeah. So unless there's benefit, we should not do it.
Okay. So if we look at this now, in this context, if someone considers that, say, if we take the standard doctor-patient metaphor, that the doctor has to give medication, sometimes the medication may be painful. Maybe the medicine may be better, or the injection has to be given, which is painful. So where it is essential, it may have to be done. But where it is possible, the doctor should do it in a way that is as painless as possible.
Yes. And the doctor should never do anything that is not beneficial for the patient.
Yes, if the doctor just injects something which is not a medicine at all,
Yeah.
then that is undesirable.
Yeah. So the two quadrants which are not to be done, never to be done, that's not beneficial. So therefore, we should never do it.
Interesting, you could put here, there is placebo effect, where it is actually not meant to be beneficial, but it's pleasing. Oh, I'm getting treated. But in a sense, people get benefited.
Yes. So therefore, that there is some benefit there. A placebo has its benefits too.
Yeah.
You know, the verse that comes to mind with this diagram?
Yeah.
This is a verse Prabhupada used to quote, and there was a lot of discussion on this.
Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat.
Correct. Satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, ma bruyat, satyam apriyam, priyam cha nan ritam bruyat, esha dharma sanatanaha. So, satyam bruyat means speak the truth, but priyam bruyat, speak it pleasingly. So, satyam bruyat, priyam bruyat, speak the truth, speak it pleasingly. So that's number 4.
Yeah.
Right?
Yes, Maharaj.
Then ma bruyat satyam apriyam. Don't speak truth that is not pleasing. So
that is quadrant 2.
Quadrant 2. Here it says don't do it.
Yeah.
But Prabhupada did say at times that this is a social convention, and when it comes to scriptural discussions or spiritual wisdom, because we are spreading the message of Krishna consciousness, we are not obliged to always abide by this dictum, by this social convention. We may have to speak the truth sometimes, even if it is not pleasing.
Yes.
But also there are, this will need a little discussion perhaps as we go along. But ma bruyat satyam apriyam, essentially it says don't speak truth that is apriyam, which is not pleasing. So it essentially says don't be in number 2.
Yes.
But Prabhupada says it may be essential. We have to do it.
Yes, that's true.
Therefore, in number 2, we are speaking of abiding by satyam, even if it is not pleasing.
Yes, Maharaj.
Right. Then priyam cha na anritam bruyat. So don't speak something that is anritam, which means false, which is not true, merely because it is pleasing.
Yes.
Right. So that is probably number 3.
And I think the number 1 doesn't deserve mention itself.
Yes.
It is implicit, it should not be done.
Yes. So number 3 means it is very pleasing, but it's not truthful. It's not beneficial. Because if something is not truthful, it won't be beneficial either.
Yeah.
Right. So number 3 is actually that something you say something that is pleasing, but it is not truthful. It is not beneficial. So we should not do it. That's what it means. Priyam cha nanritam bruyat. Esha dharma sanatana. And number 1 means it's neither pleasing, nor truthful, nor beneficial. We should never indulge in that. Right?
Yes, Maharaj.
So we're talking of number 4. There is you have these subhashitas, proverbs in Sanskrit.
Yes, Maharaj.
And there is a proverb called apriyasya chapatyasya.
Apriyasya pathyasya. That which is
So,
undesirable is forbidden.
no, pathya refers to something that is salubrious, salutary, something that is wholesome, beneficial, pathya, you know. So, but it is apriya.
Okay.
In other words, that sometimes, even though something is apriya, it should still be spoken if it is pathya, if it is hitam.
Yes.
It is, even if something is disagreeable, uh, it should be spoken if it is wholesome, if it is beneficial, if it is truthful. So we see Vidura speaking to Dhritarashtra about this in the Mahabharata, or we see Maricha speaking to Ravana about this in the Ramayana, where Ravan goes to him and says, you should help me to kill Ram, or you should help me to abduct Sita.
Yes.
Distracting Ram and getting him to the forest, and Marich cautions him that, you're inviting death. Don't do this. I mean, you'll find many people who will tell you what's pleasing to you, but a true friend is one who will tell you the truth. And as your genuine well-wisher, I'm telling you, don't do this.
Yes, man.
And
In fact, he says that whoever has advised you to do this is actually your enemy and should be punished.
Enemy. Yes, yes.
Yes, man. As going back to the Dhritarashtra's example, Dhritarashtra's example.
Sorry?
Just going back to the Dhritarashtra's example, there's one point over there that Vidura and Dhritarashtra had a lifelong relationship. And if you read the Mahabharata, Vidura does not speak in that tone with that severity any time earlier.
Yes.
He does speak his disapproval quite vocally whenever Duryodhana is doing something wrong, and so he doesn't hide his disapproval. But the tone which he uses in the Bhagavatam, that we don't see in the Mahabharata. So in one sense, Vidura, we can also say that although Vidura speaks strongly to Dhritarashtra, he also speaks strongly at the right time. Maybe while Dhritarashtra had Duryodhana and he was still, that attachment was still a hopeful attachment, then he was blind to anything else. So I feel a strong speech, there are examples of strong speech, but there is also, like earlier you said, the age of a person. Even strong speech is effective at particular times. So it may not be effective at other times.
Yes.
So, it means there's one thing that in principle, we do acknowledge the category 2 as valid. That there are times when even if something is displeasing, it needs to be spoken. But what are those times? That has to be carefully discerned. And so maybe we could discuss some criteria based on which when is speaking in quadrant 2 acceptable, or it is essential, we could say. So there are examples. In principle we accept that, but in practice, when to do that, could there be any guidelines for that?
When it is essential to speak the truth even if it is not pleasing, meaning apriyasya cha pathyasya.
Yes.
Right? So your question is, what are those circumstances?
Yes.
When it is essential to speak the truth even though it is displeasing.
Yes.
Right? I would say when the third quadrant, that is speaking the truth pleasingly, is not possible or is not effective or somehow is not possible to do or is not appropriate.
Or we could say it's not effective also.
It's not workable, it's not effective. The first priority should always be Satyam Bruyat Priyam Bruyat. Speak it relatively, speak it truthfully. That quadrant, speak the truth, but speak it, and it should be for the benefit and it should also be pleasing. That should always be the first priority, right?
Okay.
When it comes to uh, Srila Prabhupada's criticism of Satyam Bruyat Priyam Bruyat, Ma Bruyat Satyam Priyam, that, don't speak truth that is displeasing. So Prabhupada, as I mentioned earlier, said this is a social convention and all that. So many times in his lectures, in his letters, conversations, Prabhupada will mention that no, this social convention is not applicable to us as devotees, and that we should be willing to speak the truth because that is the important thing. Now, there are also many occasions when Srila Prabhupada tempered that very strong stand
Yes.
that he took.
Yes, Maharaj.
I mean, don't look at the other quotes, then you may think that you should always, regardless of point, is if one looks at Srila Prabhupada's quotes, then Srila Prabhupada was not against speaking truth in a palatable way at all. It's not that because he said that we should speak the truth regardless of whether it is pleasing or displeasing, it doesn't mean that he was against speaking the truth in a palatable way. What I'm trying to say is that it is not that speaking truth is necessarily synonymous with being unpleasant.
Yes.
It's not that every time you speak the truth, it must be unpleasant.
That's true.
It's not like that. Sometimes it may be so. And that's where the second quadrant, where we have to speak the truth despite the fact that, it's displeasing to somebody.
Yes.
Right?
Yes, ma'am.
But so there are many instances like this in which Prabhupada did mention one letter that he wrote to one devotee in which he cautioned him to speak the truth but deal with him softly because he has spiritual inclination. So that devotee may have been, speaking to some other person. And so in that connection, the devotee must have written to Srila Prabhupada. So then Srila Prabhupada responded that you must speak the truth, yes, but deal with him softly because he has a spiritual inclination. So meaning, if you see that spiritual inclination in somebody, then you would be careful. Deal softly.
So basically the idea is the spiritual inclination needs to be fanned. And that shouldn't shouldn't get extinguished.
Yes.
Yes, Maharaj.
And because of harsh speech, because of truth being spoken harshly, even when it was not really necessary, when it could have been avoided, what you may end up doing is to drive that person away.
Yes, Maharaj.
A negative impression about spiritual knowledge, about Krishna consciousness, like that.
Yeah.
The effort should always be to speak the truth palatably.
Yes. Yes, Maharaj. So that is first criteria we could say. Now, yes. Now, now with respect to when the truth is unpalatable or displeasing. Now, why is it displeasing? There could be various reasons for that. One is, sometimes people say that I will not pander to political correctness. But it is not that every time sensitivity is asked for, that doesn't mean we are pandering to political correctness. Or we could put it this way, that some norms of political correctness have evolved because of a valid need for sensitivity. But sometimes some norms of political correctness become so extreme that they don't allow the truth to be spoken. So then we can see that if the truth is displeasing, why is it displeasing? It could be because maybe the person is hypersensitive and they need to be, if we just dance around the truth, as they say, then we will not benefit them at all. But sometimes it could be that also, so we could say, why is it displeasing? We can consider that. And then
Yes.
if it is something specific to a particular context, then adjusting things so that it is not displeasing to that person. Say, for example, there are certain words which were quite commonplace in the past. Say, for example, the N word was quite commonplace maybe 50 or 100 years ago to refer to a particular class of people. Now it is considered outrageous. So there are many words which just set off unnecessary agitation in people's minds. Say, for example, the word cult. Prabhupada often says the cult of Krishna consciousness, or the cult of Lord Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. But today the word cult just triggers a lot of agitation. Oh, there's indoctrination, there is manipulation of people, and it triggers alarm. So when we talk about agitation, what is causing that agitation, and whether that agitation is essential or not. Sometimes we might say, this is the way it was spoken, this is the word that we use, I'm using them now, but it's causing agitation which is not necessary. So then changing certain words so that that agitation is not caused, that is not changing the truth, because that's something which is just, you might say the same truth, but it is having a undesirable effect. So we could look at why it is causing agitation, and then see whether we need to still speak that or not speak that. Thoughts on this, Maharaj?
We started off our discussion by speaking about not just the circumstances and the listeners, but also the speakers, right?
Yes.
So it is the speaker's responsibility to make a good judgment. If we keep in mind that the purpose of speaking of Satyam is Hitam, then we will have to keep in mind sensitivities. And also, as I said, natures of people are different. Some people like to be told things strongly, you just do it. And some people, will go away if you tell them something like that. Just do this. They will go away. Some people just tell you, just tell me what to do. So it's really a very subjective thing. And each one will act differently. But if we keep in mind that, as Prabhupada says in one of the purports in Bhagavad Gita, he says, the purpose of speaking Satyam is to present facts as they are, to not misrepresent, and also it should be for the benefit of others.
Is this in the Bhagavad Gita or the Bhagavatam, Maharaj, that Prabhupada talks about realization?
Bhagavad Gita purports.
Okay.
So one of the Bhagavad Gita purports, where he speaks about Satyam.
Yeah.
Satyam. So Satyam means to present the facts properly. Don't misrepresent the facts. And ultimately, it should be done for the benefit of everybody concerned. So the speaker has to keep that in mind. Now, because these things are so fluid and so subject to the perceptions of the speaker, so there will be different ways in which different speakers judge a certain person or judge a certain situation, and both speakers will speak differently because their judgment of the situation differs and also their personal natures differ. So, we can't paint all speakers with one brush. There is going to be a difference. But I think we can keep in mind these three main points that Prabhupada has said about the
Yes.
purpose of speaking Satyam.
Yes, Maharaj, that's true. Now, just taking this a little further, now, Satya and Hita, they are not necessarily equivalent. Although normally Satya will lead to Hita, mm, but here we have the point of, like, if you administer a medicine, the person is benefited. But in the case of spiritual growth, it is that the person has to consciously choose to turn toward Krishna. So, how can we quantify what is Hita? It is that a person heard the pure undiluted message of Krishna. Is that the benefit? Or is it that the person heard something and became attracted and then wants to hear more? Or is it that the person heard something, but then that was so agitating to that person that they left? So Hita, we could see it as get them to hear once, or get them to hear so that they can keep hearing more and more. So that could also means talk about, gradation. So Satya can be spoken at levels according to maybe. So right now this person can digest only this much, and then maybe a little more they can digest. So how would we quantify Hita over here? Can we say that increased eagerness to hear about Krishna is the Hita, or what would we mean by Hita over here? Benefit.
I would say Hitam has to be seen in the context of to what degree the listener is getting closer to the spiritual path and to Krishna consciousness in a sustainable way. So we also take a longer term thing. Let's say you speak the truth, so that person has heard this spiritual wisdom, so it's gone in. But because of the way that person was dealt with, because of the way that knowledge was spoken, this person may be turned away and may not come back. Okay? So the truth has gone inside, but it's not been digested. But you've lost the person, at least for this life, or at least for a long time.
Yes.
But if it is spoken in a certain way that ensures that the person is not driven away, that he comes back and he listens to more, and he then discusses with you and so on, then obviously that's a better way of doing things. So I would say that would be the criterion. It's very hard to quantify such a thing. But
yeah, of course, not criterion.
What degree are you bringing that person closer to Krishna?
So that Hita has to be that, as you said, that the person is going away, then we have not really done Hita.
Yes.
So continuing the medicine metaphor, that suppose somebody does some procedure which is excessively painful, that the patient will say, I'll not come again at all. Or if we could say more of like a physical therapy, that you get the patient to do some exercises. Now, if you don't get the patient out of the comfort zone, then they will nearly not improve, they will not recover. But if you exercise the patient so much that they think, hey, this is the workout I have to do every day, I cannot do it, they just stop coming after that. So that means that if we could talk these three things, that comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone. So a certain amount of agitation may be required. We have to challenge people's existing conceptions to some extent. But if it is such a big challenge that they feel their whole world is falling apart, then they may think it's not worth it.
Or think that what you're saying is so dead against their cherished beliefs, which they hold very dear to them, and they just can't bear the thought of even listening further to such a thing. Then perhaps that person is not a good candidate to be spoken to in any case. But perhaps in some cases, these entrenched beliefs maybe because of not having had the opportunity to hear
Yes.
Krishna consciousness being presented in the proper way. So that's really a judgment that the speaker has to make. You know, it's all very subjective, and that's why I use the word wisdom. And we also had judgment, we had nature. You know, these are the facts. These are the factors that will ultimately determine how a speaker presents things.
Yes, Maharaj. So another point to just, I mean, this is, as you said, it's nuanced and subtle. Another point to complicate things is that the people don't necessarily in advance accept the truth to be the truth. In today's world, there are so many spiritual paths, and when they come to a spiritual teacher to hear, there may be some acceptance. Okay, this person may be wise and I am ready to give them a hearing. But we may think I am speaking authorized truth based on Shastra, but we cannot assume that our audience accepts our authority.
Yes.
So to some extent, people may judge us or evaluate or assess us based not so much simply on what we speak, but also how we speak it, how we conduct ourselves. So it might be that in a 1 hour class, 59 minutes might be sound, reasoned arguments, but 1 minute might be some harsh words spoken, and then that's what that person remembers. So,
one time there was some devotee wrote a letter to Sheila Prabhupada, and I asked the question that should one always speak the truth?
okay.
He was referring to the time of preaching or presenting Krishna consciousness. So should one always speak the truth? And Srila Prabhupada replied, yes. But a qualified devotee will be able to speak it in a palatable way, in such a way that even an enemy will be attracted. And then he said, this is the art of speaking the truth. And then he went on to say the same thing, that he said that it's not so much what you say, but how you say that makes it important, that makes the difference. And with experience, we will learn to speak and present the truth in the proper manner. So Srila Prabhupada made several points in that particular exchange with this devotee. Number one, that yes, you must always speak the truth, Satyam, but it should be Priya. Because it is Satyam, it must also be Priya. If it is Satyam, it is Priya, it will also be Hitam. Because that person will accept it. And then he said, this is the art of speaking the truth. So this is a very important phrase, I feel, for all of us
The art of
who
speaking the
present Krishna consciousness everywhere. It's not just about speaking truth, it's about how to speak the truth. Because Prabhupada then mentioned there that how you say it is very, very important.
Yes.
So this is the most successful system, Prabhupada says.
Yeah. So in essence, if we assume that we have authority because we speak the truth, and then we may speak something which is, so there are two things then. There is something which is, the truth is unpalatable, and the second is truth is spoken unpalatably.
Yes, yes.
So they're two different things. So as far as possible, truth shouldn't be spoken unpalatably.
Correct, correct.
Now,
so elsewhere also Prabhupada said that you should speak truth in a way, because you also asked me in terms of the response, what are we looking at in terms of...
Yeah.
I think Prabhupada said, you should speak truth in such a way that the person responds positively.
Yes.
So if the response is going to be highly negative, then we have to consider where we went wrong. And there are some audiences which will have just no interest. And no matter what you say, so if you're sticking to the truth, no matter what you say, they will not accept.
Yes.
But then what can we do about that? We can't.
Yes, Maharaj. That's
We
true.
can't stop speaking the truth because of these situations.
Yes,
But
Maharaj.
as far as possible, our effort has to be to see that the person responds positively whilst still speaking the truth.
Yes. Here also we could talk about, I mean, speaking the truth, we could also say which truth, in the sense that scripture has many truths within them, and we needn't speak, do we necessarily have to speak that part of the scripture which is true, but that is going to agitate the person. So whether that is essential. There is a conversation of Srila Prabhupada with his disciples in Hawaii, and they asked Prabhupada, when we tell the scholars that, say, Maharaj Ugrasen had some astronomical number of bodyguards, they start laughing at us. And they say, how is it possible they all lived in Dwarka? Where were their houses? Where were their washrooms? And Prabhupada gives a very surprisingly non-confrontational reply. He says, among all the verses in the Bhagavatam, was that the only thing you found to speak to them?
Yes, yes. So the part of the wisdom and the judgment comes not just in speaking the truth, not just in speaking it palatably, but also judging the content, also judging which aspect of the truth you're going to be presenting to whom, when, and why. So what aspect, as you rightly said, there's so much in the scripture, and why don't we focus on the basic points, the body and the soul, transmigration of the soul, the law of karma. So there are many, many things that you can speak of to a newcomer. There's no need to get into areas that are unnecessarily controversial in that person's mind. In your mind, it's not controversial, but that person may see it as being controversial. So why to unnecessarily go into that space prematurely?
Yes.
So what you speak is also important. When we say how you speak is important, it doesn't mean that what you speak is not important, even if it is the truth. So now, judging which part of the truth to present and which part to not present.
Yes, Maharaj. So at one level, we do any part of education means challenging others' conceptions. In fact, we could say any good discussion or interaction involves a certain level of reincarnation. Now, I had a particular conception, and then I realized, hey, that's not the exact thing, and maybe that conception dies, and then a more evolved conception comes up. So challenging people's existing conceptions is essential, but then we need to first establish our authority before we challenge the conception also. Not establish authority by simply lording it over them, but so there has to be, we could say, some part of the speech which is pleasing, which is reasonable, which is speak pleasing, that establishes credibility, and then some part which may challenge. But if we directly challenge people's conceptions without having established our authority, without having considered their sensitivity or their vulnerability, we could say, then that might backfire.
Yes, Prabhupada could get away with it. He could say that. I've been hearing conversations, and many times Prabhupada is directly confrontational and challenging. At the very first meeting, the moment the professors sit down, okay, tell me. what have you taught in the university? You teach, who am I? Have you taught
Yes.
this? He gets back. But they can see that he doesn't mean, malice. There's no malice in his voice, that he's speaking it genuinely from conviction. And also that he has that stature. They've come in a mood of respect anyway. So they've already come in a mood to listen. And plus, he's an older man. So in between, he would joke. See, I'm an elderly man. I can speak and get away with it, So we have to consider all these factors.
Yes, Maharaj. So so we talked about the truth. We could say which aspect of the truth to speak is one aspect. Then we need to be aware also of what is the effect, at least to some extent, of what is going to be the effect of what we speak. And then some agitation is essential, but some agitation, if it is not essential, then not speaking those things, or that is also the responsibility of the speaker. So now, if there was how much of the truth to speak on which occasion. So it could be that I just give some people some food for thought so that they think and then they come back again. That could be one approach. Other approach could be that actually they may never come again. So let them hear. Let them get a full picture of the unvarnished truth, and it will stay with them. So, so now it's like give one dose of vaccine. If they don't come, at least this will work for them. Or give them one thing, let them see the benefit, and they may come again further for vaccination or whatever. So if you can take the medical metaphor. So any thoughts on this? How much of the truth to speak at one point?
Prabhupada says that will come with experience.
Okay.
We have to learn the art of speaking the truth. That will come with experience and with practice, Sheila Prabhupada says in his letters. So when we experience the different reactions that people give us, when we preach in a certain way, we learn by experience. And look, that was not the nice way to do it. I made a mistake there. I should be careful the next time. I shouldn't preach in that way. So by experience, by practice, by also looking at how experienced good preachers present Krishna consciousness, we can learn like that.
So Maharaj, when we say experience, are we essentially meaning observing the effect of what we do? Because what does experience mean in this particular context? Like when we say doctor is experienced, okay, they gave different medicines at different times and they observed what happens. So it's mainly observing the effect.
Yes. You saw that by speaking in this way, there was a vigorous reaction and vigorous negative reaction. And that put off so many people, and then the program stopped. It was a nice weekly program coming up, and then people stopped coming, and there was so much criticism going on, and the whole program collapsed, right? And I learned, okay, so that's not a way to do things. I made a mistake there.
Yes.
Coming back to, which part of the truth to present, etc., I'll tell you a bit of a funny thing that happened, many years ago when I was about to go to a certain place for preaching. It was the first time I went to that place as a preacher, and so I asked the local devotee who had organized the program, so what would you like me to speak on? So he said, you can speak on any topic, no problem, but please don't tell them to stop eating fish.
Okay.
Why? He said, because here people it's a coastal area. And people are so addicted to eating fish, they eat fish 3 times, 4 times a day. They can't live without fish. So if you tell them stop eating fish, meat, this meat, at least okay, they can maybe digest it, but fish, no way. Don't tell them that. Speak anything but that. Now, had I not got that little tip, I might have spoken about fish because I knew that people in those areas eat a lot of fish. So I might have said it. I don't know, but perhaps I would have. But after that, I was cautious. So I didn't mention it at that time. And slowly, people have become devotees and they've given up fish and all that. So
Yes, Maharaj.
it's like that. So not eating fish is something we want to say, but in certain circumstances we withhold. We don't say it.
Yes. So Maharaj, this brings us to one point, that what comprises compromising the truth. Prabhupada often said, I never compromise, my spiritual master never compromised. So anytime sensitivity is recommended, often some people will say that you are simply compromising with the truth. So in my understanding, compromising the truth would mean when we are asked a specific question and then we are wishy-washy. So I say, if somebody in that context had only asked you publicly, should you eat meat? Should we eat meat or not? Then maybe, so if an issue comes up on its own and then we waffle on it, that could be compromise. But choosing not to speak a particular issue, that needn't be compromise. Any thoughts on this?
See, Priyam cha nanritam bruyat. Don't speak an untruth because it's pleasing.
Okay.
So let's say, telling people not to eat meat is a sensitive point in a particular area where we go. Okay? So you don't start off in the very first lecture by bombarding them about the ill effects of meat eating and, what the karmic effects are and so on. Okay, so you don't tell them all that. You give usual basics, lecture on the basics of Krishna consciousness. But then somebody asks you the question, as you said, should we eat meat? So obviously we can't speak an untruth just because that person would like to hear it. So we definitely can't say, it's okay to eat meat, it's fine. We can't say that. So what we could say is, what I would say is that, look, it's not right, but we'll leave the discussion for another time. You just understand the process, what this Krishna consciousness is about. You start chanting, and automatically everything will work out, everything will happen.
That's interesting.
Yeah.
Now, wouldn't that, what would be the effect of this? Would it raise, why among the other audience, why is this question being avoided? Would it raise that question, or it will just avoid agitation?
If there was a certain audience where I felt it was necessary to speak in detail, then I would have spoken about why meat eating is so harmful.
Okay.
Yeah? So in some cases, say like I gave you the example of that place where I went, he said, please don't speak about this. So if they had asked me the question, if somebody from the audience had asked me about fish.
Okay.
After this devotee had told me this before the lecture.
Right.
So I can't tell them, just go on eating fish, it's fine, it's okay. I can't do that. At the same time, it's not advisable from that devotee's point of view that I launch into a whole big, analysis of how bad it is to eat fish. I may be very brief about it, briefly talk about it, okay, but emphasize that first understand what Krishna consciousness is. Okay.
Yeah, and by that way, you're also stressing the point that Krishna consciousness is much bigger than just not doing this.
Yes.
So
Yes.
don't get too fixated. Oh, I'll have to give this up. Understand the
Yes.
whole. Yeah. Okay.
Because there are many people who say, "Oh my God, they're going to ask me to give up meat, then I'm sorry, I can't come here."
Okay.
So lift them up to a certain level of understanding and faith, and then gradually these things will go on. See, we'll see in the early days when Prabhupada started the movement, the first batch of devotees that got initiated, he told them about the 4 regulative principles only after they were initiated.
Yes.
Right?
It's true. Yeah. Mhm. So, Maharaj, this also brings us to one more point, that when we talk about which truth to speak, there are central truths and there are, we could say, peripheral truths. And we could also say this from a perspective of the philosophy, but we could also say this from the perspective of the audience. That for the audience, hearing this right now is more important, and that is not so important. So, any guidelines about, because quite often it may happen that a whole good talk gets undone because of an unrelated issue, unrelated question answer, or just a unrelated passing comment which just agitates people. So what guidelines can we use to understand what is central and say what is peripheral?
That which is an essential principle in Krishna consciousness is central. Krishna is the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Now, you cannot say something else. Okay? But there may be occasions when you won't stress it. You won't even mention it, perhaps. Let's say you go to a corporate program, where they want you to speak on, something, some particular topic, and you try to bring in some spiritual dimension to it, but you've been strictly told not to bring God in the picture. It's happened to me a couple of times. They tell you, please don't mention God or anything, So you have a choice of either to go to that program or not go at all. And if you go, then you have to do it on their terms. So if you find the terms to be not that objectionable, and that you're not really compromising that much, you're presenting things in a way that will be beneficial up to a point only, but then gradually you will get the opportunity to go deeper into it, then you might take up that opportunity.
So that means what is central and what is peripheral can dramatically vary based on the context. That Krishna as the Supreme Person is central, but there it is not central. Maybe it's just give people an introduction to spirituality, make them at least explore life spiritual dimension. That's the central purpose.
Yes.
Yeah, I remember I was talking with Hanumat Preshak Maharaj. He told me he had been invited to speak on science and spirituality, something like that, spirituality and psychology, by a professor. And then the HOD of that department came for the class, and the dean of the college came for the class. And then the professor told him, Swami, if you speak anything objectionable, it'll kill me now. All these people. So then, after that, he said that one person asked him, Swami, I see you are in a monk's dress. So what is your religion? So then Maharaj said that I spoke at that time that, I may have my religion, you may have your religion, or you may have no religion. Now, right now, we are discussing about psychology and consciousness. So, let's focus on this. If you want to know about my religion, we can talk about it afterwards. So, and he told me that the HOD, the principal, they were about nodding. That means the idea is that you don't use our podium to speak, to propagate your own ideology. So on that podium, you speak what is expected or what you have been asked to speak.
Yes, yes. So sensitivity to the situation is the hallmark of a good preacher.
Oh,
A good preacher must be able to distinguish, must be able to discriminate, what to present, how to present, to different audiences and circumstances, etc.
yes, Maharaj. So, mm,
I just remembered a joke which I also say sometimes. There was this
yeah.
a king and an astrologer. He had an astrologer.
Hmm.
So he came and said, "I'm an astrologer." Okay, so tell me my future. So he said, "Oh," he looked at the palm. Are you an astrologer or a palm reader or something? So he looked at the palm of the king and said, "Oh, all your relatives are going to die before you, and you will perform their last rites with your own hands." So the king was very attached to his relatives and his family, so he became furious and he ordered that astrologer to be arrested. And then he called for another astrologer to come. That astrologer was a little more intelligent and he, he had heard what had happened to the first fellow. So he was asked the same question, tell me about my future. So when he read the palm or the chart or whatever it is, he saw the same thing that the first astrologer had said,
Hmm.
but he presented it differently. Oh, my dear king, you will have a very long life. You will outlive your relatives. You will live longer than your relatives. So the king was very happy and he rewarded him. So
Yeah.
basically, he said the same thing that, your relatives will die before you, but he presented it in a way that appealed to the king,
Yeah,
right?
that's beautiful. Yeah. Yeah, Bhakti Tirth Maharaj has written a book, one of the spiritual warriors book. So he's talking about sense control, and the title of that chapter he had given was "Harnessing Sexual Energy for World Peace." And then he talked about how sexual attraction has caused so many wars and things like that. So it is very creative way of presenting. Yeah. I just going back to that joke, maybe I'll take this as one or two concluding points. But any thoughts on using humor in presenting? Because sometimes, as I said, humor can also backfire. What is seen as a joke by one person may not be seen as a joke by others. So, any thoughts on the subject of using humor?
Well, again, it depends on the nature of the person. It depends on the circumstances. I think a little bit of humor once in a while is fine, provided it is acceptable humor.
So,
But
yeah.
using too much of humor may distract attention from the real message.
Yes.
So some degree of humor is all right. I mean, that's
Yeah.
is fine.
No, I was talking about humor here in sense of sensitivity, that maybe humor targeted at a particular group of people, say a particular region, a particular race, that might be appropriate in a particular, actually it shouldn't be done anytime, we could say, but especially in today's multicultural world, if humor is targeting a particular group of people, that could backfire severely.
So naturally, that's why I said depends on whether it's acceptable humor or not.
Yeah.
The humor has to be such that it is acceptable. Unfortunately, in this day and age, the kind of humor that we see is not at all something that is subtle or refined or even cultured.
Hmm.
It's what people these days are increasingly attracted to is a little raucous kind of humor, and so that kind of humor, of course, is something we don't get into at
Yeah.
all. But that's what appeals to many people these days, but we don't get into it at all. But if it is humor that is acceptable and used now and then just to kind of embellish your presentation and keep the people glued, and that humor has some connection to what you're saying. That's important. You
Yes.
speak, you give a lesson through the humor.
Yes, that's true.
It's not humor just for the sake of humor, just to make people, but you want to give a message through that.
That's true, Maharaj. So one last question, and then maybe I'll try to summarize. When we talk about sensitivity with respect to different audiences, so if some people are hypersensitive because of whatever reasons, say somebody has come from a background of discrimination or whatever, and then any statement just raises red flags for them. So is it advisable, I had mentioned this earlier, that if a particular devotee finds a particular speaker's presentations very agitating, then is it advisable for the devotee? I'll still respect that speaker as a devotee, as a spiritual teacher, but this doesn't work for me. So to what extent?
I think it's okay. I think it's okay to some degree for the devotee to think like that, because if the devotee still continue to attend those classes, he might start committing so many offenses.
Oh, okay.
And it might also disturb his own consciousness. He'll get agitated and so on. Then if that's the result that's going to happen, then might as well just avoid it.
So we could say anukulyasya sankalpa pratikulyasya varjanam.
Yes.
You have to see what is favorable for one's spiritual growth.
Yes, yes.
And so it's not that we should be avoiding agitation completely, but we could also say that it shouldn't be like a constant agitation. So, or it should not be like an overwhelming agitation.
It should not be unnecessary.
Because I don't think any speaker will, some speakers like to create like a sensation when they speak, and they may feel that no speaker will think that what I am speaking is unnecessary agitation. The speaker's perspective, they may feel this is necessary for you to hear. Like say some speakers might say that it's necessary for the audience to hear that you shouldn't eat fish. But maybe that is not the time for them to hear that.
Or rather, I would say that sometimes speakers can be not deliberately speaking something that is unnecessary and creates agitation, but they're really careless and casual.
Okay, that's possible, yeah.
Careless and casual and not really thinking deeply about what they're saying and what impact it could have.
Yes, Maharaj.
So it's unnecessary to say that, to say that, because it causes agitation. It's not even really so necessary to convey some important spiritual truth or something.
Yes, Maharaj. And this is where I think what you talk about experience counts a lot. Over the years, when I've been traveling, I recognize that after I speak in a class, giving the audience time to speak and hear from them. This actually I learned from you. Every time I see after you give a class, it's like your class might be 1.5 hours. Sometimes you sit for 1.5, 2 hours. This is a long queue of people wanting to meet you. And you give everybody your full attention and time. So I actually learned a lot that when we hear from our audience, we learn a lot about what works for them, what doesn't work for them, and then we can, as you said, get that judgment, get that. So for a speaker, the wisdom doesn't come just by reading scripture; it also comes by interacting with the audience. Maybe you could speak some concluding words about the importance of this, and then I'll summarize.
Ultimately, we are here for the audience, right? So the very purpose of it, as I said, for Satyam is Hitam, no? So if Hitam is the objective, who's Hitam? First of all, for the speaker himself, it's also because when I speak, I'm very clear, it's also for my benefit. And I find that when I speak Krishna consciousness or give a lecture, the person who benefits the most is me, because I have to think about what I'm going to say. I have to meditate on that. And after the lecture is over, the subject continues for a while in the mind. So the speaker benefits, at least I find that. So Hitam works for me. So I'm the first priority. Or also you're speaking to an audience, because if you didn't have the audience, you wouldn't be giving the lecture in the first place. So if it's for them that we are primarily speaking, then we should be concerned about how they relate to the subject of the talk. What are their concerns in relation to that, etc.
Yes. So I'll try to summarize. You want to add anything else? Any points left out? Okay, thank you. So we discussed on the topic of sensitivity in presenting spiritual wisdom. We talked about there are four factors: the speaker, the subject, the context, and the audience. So I think we covered various aspects in it. So speaker has to be mature, and the speaker has to, you said, wisdom and nature. So based on different people's nature, they will speak in particular ways. And with respect to wisdom is what can be developed. And then we discussed about what all the developing wisdom can mean. So broadly, if we divide into these three factors, that we have to consider, we are speaking the truth, but we are speaking the truth for a purpose of benefiting the audience. And whether the benefit is happening or not, we need to consider. So we had that 4 quadrants, where if something is not truthful, not beneficial, and not pleasing, then that's undesirable. So it's pleasing but not truthful, that's also undesirable. And the best is if it is truthful and pleasing. But in some cases, when that 4th quadrant doesn't work, then we may have to speak truthful even if it is not pleasing. And then most of our talk was what are the parameters for deciding when to speak this. The first you said is, first try to speak the truth palatably only. And you quoted the Subhashita. We also discussed Bhagavad Gita 1740, 1716, 1715, Anudvegakaram Vakyam. Then within this parameter of when to speak, when it's not possible to speak the truth palatably, then we may have to speak the unpalatable truth. Then we have to see whether the agitation that is caused, why is it caused? Is it because of some unwanted, say, use of words, like say cult or something like that? Then better avoid that. Or is it a necessary agitation because that's what is required for people to revise their conceptions, to grow in their understanding? Then agitation also has to be such that people can take it. Like we talked about the comfort zone, stretch zone, and panic zone. So we want to stretch people's conceptions, but not so much that they feel overwhelmed. And that would mean that the speaker has to consider. So one criteria for understanding Hita, when is the person benefited? It is not just by they hearing the truth, but also by they wanting to hear the truth more. They wanting to take up spirituality more. And if they go away, then that is undesirable. So then we talked about in this, we cannot assume that because we are speaking the truth, people will accept it, because we may have to establish our authority. And that means the way we conduct ourselves, the way we speak, the cultured way, the logical way, that will establish the authority. And then also which truth we speak. So truth has many aspects, and that which is most relevant or beneficial for the audience, we speak that. And if something is, like give the example of fish, that if something is going to be too agitating or impractical for them, then not speaking it is not a compromise. So speaking, choosing which truth to speak is not compromise, but refusing to speak the truth itself when it is asked for, or speaking an untruth, that is a compromise. And then we talked about how devotees will learn by experience, and experience essentially means observing the effect of what we speak. And that means we interact with the audience, and we know that we're speaking for the audience. So what is the effect we can hear from them to learn. And humor also, if we use it, is appropriate. And that means not targeted toward a particular group and used in moderation. And then you also mentioned about Srila Prabhupada, that although he, because of his age and spiritual maturity, spiritual stature, spoke certain things, and he could be directly confrontational, and people would not sense any malice in him. But for us, it may not apply. And also, in today's digital age, we might speak one thing in one context, but people might just cut it out and hear it in another context. So it is important. So you said that sensitivity is an essential characteristic of a speaker of spiritual wisdom.
Yes.
Thank you.
And ultimately, what is the goal? We want to see that the person moves closer towards Krishna.
Yes.
That's the ultimate purpose. That is our understanding of Hitam.
Yes, Maharaj.
So if we drive the person away from Krishna, then what's the point?
Yes, Maharaj.
Right.
Yes, thank you. This was quite a comprehensive discussion and very illuminating for me personally also, many dimensions.
Yeah.
Thank you very much for your time and
thank you.
Thoughtful
Thank you,
contribution.
Chaitanya Charan Prabhu. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna. Hare Bol.